Welcome back to our next session with Lindsay Kolinsky from Okendo. Lindsay, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
Cool. We're excited as well too. So let's just go right into it. Maybe before talking a little bit about Okendo, just give us a little background about yourself, so we have some basis of what you've been through.
Yeah, so I am the director of marketing at Okendo right now. And I've been in e-commerce for about 5.5 years now. And I've done everything from customer success, working, with $10 million brands and above, and then shifted to marketing. So one of the things that I love to say is just like building that story for a brand and helping kind of connect the dots across, your whole tech stack and what you can do and how you can emulate that to a customer.
So, as a reminder for the audience, this is about customer data throughout the customer journey and harnessing that data. And so, I thought this was the perfect fit to bring in Okendo as well as Lindsay. So, before we again get really into the weeds here, Okendo, we were just talking about before. I've heard of Okendo now for the last few years. Again, I think and I know that Okendo is a nice up and coming B2B tech brand. I think I saw around 8,000, 9,000
Yep.
Shopify brands now.
Now we're getting close to 9,000 now.
Okay, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So go ahead, give us a little backstory of the Okendo journey so far, and then a little bit about what Okendo does.
Yeah, so we are a customer marketing platform, primarily known for our review solutions for Shopify brands. And within the last 2 years, we've released 3 new products. So we have reviews, of course, but then we released surveys, referrals, and quizzes. And we're coming out with loyalty next year. So our goal is to create and to mobilize what we call super fans, which is essentially, your best customers. How can you create those engaging experiences that help drive customer loyalty and engagement with you, but then also those experiences that are going to help them, talk about your brand and become, your brand advocate and help you acquire new customers at a lower rate than, all of the traditional advertising methods. And, we know with the privacy changes, everything that's happening right now, it's been really hard for brands and expensive for brands to acquire new customers. So basically, yeah, our goal is to create those super fans for you and, through all of those products and those experiences so that you can kind of rely on yourself more and your customers and become a customer first company.
So just to clarify on that and kind of put you on the spot. So
Yeah.
it's like I've always heard of the conversation of you have customer acquisition versus customer retention. Who do you focus on?
Yeah.
Your platform and kind of your message to your audience is like you would rather spend a little more time and resources on your current customers than new acquisition. Is that kind of the mission of Okendo a little bit,
I
or
would
do I have that right?
Yes, but what I would say is it's less about acquisition versus retention and more about using them together to
Hmm.
lower your acquisition costs. So again, it's really about focusing on even from the beginning of the journey, right? So something like a quiz, like that's something, even if I'm a new customer, coming to your website, engaging with you, being able to understand, right away your preferences and what you want, that's going to like start that long-term retention journey. And then it's how do I turn you into that acquisition channel for me? So it's really not a either or, it's just a matter of using the resources and sorry, not even the resource, your customers as your marketing channel and
I
being
love
able to
that.
do both.
I like that. That's a great response because I've always heard one or the other. I haven't heard the response of how do you do one. I mean, it's a loop, right? You're using the
Exactly. It's a loop.
customers to build new customers and then coming back to retain customers.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about actually. You brought up quizzes. So for some of the merchants and audience listening right now, um, when they hear quizzes, I would be like, what do you mean by that? Just like throw a quiz up on our website. Like, can you give us a couple examples of some of your customers using Okendo of like how you can utilize a quiz to obviously retain more customers and what that means?
Yeah. So, the biggest thing is quizzes are an opportunity for you to educate your customers. So, again, it could be new customers that have never been to your site or old customers that are looking to buy again. But really, it helps um, drive customers to the right product and get rid of some of that decision fatigue. So again, you can go to a website, I've heard about your brand, I've seen all your ads, and then I get to your site, say I'm, a beauty brand, right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, what shade is right for me, or what color is great for, what foundation do I need for my dry skin or something like that. So really the idea of a quiz is to help guide the customer to the right product for them. So you can ask a series of questions. It would be something, again, just going with the makeup example, like what blush shade is right for me. And the questions might be like, a bunch of images that say like, well, which skin tone do you think is yours correctly? Like what type of skin do you have? Are you allergic to anything? You can get all of this data and ask. And then at the end, based on that customer's specific answers, you can recommend them, the product. And if you want to go further, maybe recommend them a routine, right? And then the best part about it is doing an add to cart, right there. So what we find with quizzes is people who engage with a quiz convert much higher. We've seen like 17, 20, up to 25% higher conversion rate of people who engage with the quiz than people who don't. And there's a few other kind of like back end benefits to a quiz. That's great for the customer, right? Like they got their product, they bought it.
Yeah.
One, they're less likely to probably return that product, right? Because they went in and actually answered the questions and you guided them to something that was right for them. So that's going to, ultimately, if we're thinking customer experience, this is a new customer, like that's a great way to, again, start that retention and loyalty early by making sure they get the right product for them. But on the back end as well, you're collecting all that data about them. So now I know this customer's skin tone, what they're allergic to, all this, and I can continue to personalize and engage them after that initial purchase, or even if they don't make the initial purchase, right? Like I still have their email, I still have all this information about them. I can make that a personalized experience with every communication I have. And that could be, something like an upsell. It can be something like content, I think is something that like from a personalization perspective is really unique. Like, again, like how to do your makeup for your skin. Here's a tutorial because I know you bought this product and here's how to make it work. So there's so much you can do like just with that data that you get from a quiz to, either get that first customer to keep them loyal, but to also continue building that relationship later on.
I just want to say that as a consumer right now, when I've seen those quizzes, I still think of that as brand new experiences because, like, I think you're used to getting on a site and you go right into the shopping of it, and to see the pop up, to see actually, I know of plenty of brands now that have like a link on the top of their navigation now for that quiz. It's something still new that like actually is really enticing. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, the ROI on it is incredible just because again, you're already engaging them from the start. Like you're taking some of that, all that decision fatigue and all that time that they need to take of like looking at your website and trying to figure out for themselves and being like, okay, this is like what you told me. They already did all the work to get to your site. So now it's about making sure you're capturing them. So yeah, absolutely. I think like from both a brand perspective and a customer perspective, because like I said, like customers
Yeah.
just get overwhelmed. Like they don't know. There's so much on your PDP. Like there's so much going on that if they can give you those answers and you are giving them that product, like that for them is a great experience as well.
Yeah.
Because, they didn't have to get their own product or search or anything.
And as a marketer, right, like it's always the guessing game of like, okay, why did they come to our site? And it's like, well, why don't we just ask them? And then you ask them in the form of a quiz. So I'd like to just go a little deeper in the weeds and more of the actual type of data. So just for the audience that doesn't understand, we are talking about zero-party data, first-party data, third-party data. Which is that? And then can you give us a couple examples of each one?
Yeah.
So we have that education.
Yeah. So zero party data is data that the customer is voluntarily giving you. So that's, me as customer on your website. Again, when I'm answering that question, I'm basically giving you all of that information about me. So when you say, again, what's your skin type, which picture resonates with you now, I've basically given you permission. I've told you that data. First party, again, is, data that you get about a customer through someone else. And then it's kind of third is through an outsource, so it gets further and further away from what the customer is actually giving you about themselves. And the beauty about zero party data is, it's kind of wider than, some of the other sources because you're getting it right from them. So you can get, your basic demographic, which again, maybe you can get that from someone else. Like maybe you don't need that, privacy changes. You might not be able to have that access as easily as you used to, but it can be things like preferences, behaviors, all these things. One of our brands, Born Primitive, they're an athleisure brand. And this actually isn't on the quiz side. This is just kind of on the zero party data side because you can also collect them for reviews, and I can get to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But they, when you're using their yoga pants or not yoga pants or, capri pants or workout pants, they actually ask you like, what workouts are you doing in these pants? And then you can kind of find out like, oh, I know that they like to do yoga now, or they like to run. They like to do all these things. That's data that you're not really going to get without asking the customer. And again, it's on a one-to-one basis. So now I know like this specific customer likes X, Y, and Z versus again, if you were to aggregate that, you might find like, oh, I bought this list of users who are in this group that I'm going to assume they like running, but you're finding it out directly from the customer what they like. And I think again, there's a lot more trustworthy ways to get that data from the customer, and they don't feel weird or cautious about.
Well, I was going to ask you too about like even just if I'll throw out the word the customer journey. Like, there's probably a recommendation from Okendo of what are the types of questions you ask someone that just first lands on your website. Yeah. So the types of questions you're landing for the fourth or fifth time that someone lands on the website. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, again, it depends what experience you're using to collect that data. So I talked a little bit about quizzes. On the review side, usually what we'll do is we call them customer attributes. So when you leave your review, you can ask, the questions. And the beauty about a customer attribute on a review, and going back to that Born Primitive example, like what type of yoga, how tall are you, like all this information, because it's a review, that customer that's now leaving the review probably looked at the attributes of customers when they were purchasing the product. So when you're, asking them then to leave the review and you're asking them the questions about what's your height, what do you do, all this, they're not confused by it, right? Because they saw the experience, they saw the data, they used it to find people like them to see, is this the right fit for me? Same thing with the quiz, right? They're getting something out of it in return. Yeah. Like they know you're using that information to give them an output. So, they trust that. You can also do surveys as well. So one thing that we do at Okendo with surveys is we do contextual targeting. So we can kind of look at like your unified customer profile in Okendo. And if you already gave me the answer of your height in a review, I don't need to ask that question in a post-purchase survey, right? Like I can say I already have this information, but I'm missing this, ask them that. And again, with the survey, we also recommend, giving an incentive to complete the survey. So doing all those things. And I think in terms of like where you are in the journey and what data to ask, again, it really depends on like which experience you're using and why. And remembering that the information you're asking should be something that you need to know, but it also needs to be relevant to the experience. So like, I've always used this like wild example, but I'm sure there's some scientific correlation somewhere that's like, oh, dog people tend to also love yoga. And I might be tempted to ask like, well, do you like dogs? But if I'm buying athleisure, like, and you're asking me that on a review or on a survey or on a quiz, I'd be like, why are you asking me this? Like, that seems so contextually irrelevant. So again, just make sure it's, again, relevant, but also think about like what data you need to better personalize and just make sure it's like sense. And then of course, the amount you're asking at a single time just really depends on the experience. If it's a quiz, you can probably get away with a few additional questions. Don't make it too long or you're going to use conversion. Whereas a review, 3 to 5 max. So again, just it varies, but it's just about like thinking about each piece of that experience.
That's great.
That's relevant there.
So then with the brands that you're working with today, when they're collecting this data, and forgive me, this is my ignorance about Okendo, do they are they putting this data and collecting it and putting it into the Okendo platform? Are they then syncing it into other platforms? Like what's that experience like, and kind of help us follow that through?
Yeah, so we have a unified customer profile. So you can look at each, customer on a one-to-one level and see throughout all the different products, again, like what data you've collected, everything you've known, purchase history. And we do have some integrations that also pull into Okendo, but generally most of our customers are syncing that data out. So we have integrations with Klaviyo, integrations with Attentive, working on some others so that you can sync that data. And especially really anywhere where you're going to personalize or send those applications out. It's almost like we're kind of that, again, powerhouse that's helping you create those experiences to like organically collect it. and then being able to sync it to the places where you're actually engaging and, communicating one-to-one with your customers.
Well, that's what I was gonna like talk to you about really quick, because at the end of the day, it's about that personalization, and it's understanding, well, what are all the touch points that we have already? Like we brought up Klaviyo, we have emails going out, maybe we have SMS messages going out. Yeah, I'll throw in the customer support angle, like the agents that are talking to these customers, right? So I assume that's what's like, it has to be really important to think about, of like, it's not just collecting the data, but it's making sure that that data is passed to the right people when they're talking and they're messaging those customers, that they understand more and more about these customers so they can have those conversations, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, going to like the CX and the customer service side, having that data as an agent. And again, this is like, if you're sitting here and someone's complaining, like, I didn't like this product, or say, again, they left a bad review, you can kind of signal that to your CS team and say, like, hey, proactively reach out to this customer. Why did they leave the review?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you have the data and you look and you say, well, they had curly hair, but they brought a shampoo for straight hair. Like, let me be proactive and say, hey, I think that was the wrong product for you. Let's try something else. And having that data, or even going back and saying, like, this person previously left a 5-star review. Why are they unhappy now? Like, having all of that data about the customers is just going to help your teams like be more proactive and solution oriented as well.
Right.
They can really understand the customer at a deeper level and know, okay, based on what they're telling me and based on what this data that I know about them, I think this is a solution that's going to be best. And thinking long term about that customer experience, things are going to go wrong. You're not always going to have a perfect customer experience, but if you're able to solution it appropriately and in a way
Mm-hmm.
that feels above and beyond, or more than normal, because you have that data, you can save that customer and then continue to keep them on their journey to become your brand advocate, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
it is important to have that at each touch point to make sure like you're also not losing that customer and that potential brand advocate.
And I just kind of want to take a second just to like clarify something, because as marketers, you and I are both. I would say if you look back, say just even like 3-4 years ago, there's so much focus on the third party data you were talking about, right? So, but to understand your customer, your audience, you have to go out to other partners and then capture data, purchase data, and bring that in and say, okay, here's a little bit more about what I should know about my customer. But it's so interesting just like how fast the switch was to, nope, like that's not the right way anymore. The right way is to go one-to-one with your current people that are visiting your website, the people that you're interacting with daily, to then learn and understand. Like, isn't that, it happened really fast, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the world was forced to. I think,
Yeah.
Apple and Facebook and Google, they all changed their privacy. I think, and again, going back to that idea that when you're asking the customer directly with these experiences that benefit them, they're not sitting here being like, why are you asking for this? Right?
Yeah.
As long as you keep it relevant, they understand, they trust it. Whereas in the past, you would get all these ads and you're like, was my phone listening to me? Like, how did you know I did this? Like, this is weird. And, it was really consumers that demanded more of that privacy, and the tech partners, answer
Yeah.
to that. So I think, as brands, they were forced to, because the means that they were getting these data, they weren't allowed to get it anymore. But I think at the end of the day, again, like establishing that one-to-one relationship with your customer allows you to not have to rely on like those paid ads and those audiences and all that, right? You can get it from them in a scalable way.
Yeah.
And again, you can still, even though it's one-to-one, right? Like, you can still group your customers because you have these all set up as like fields and properties, on the profiles as you sync it, creating audience segments, right? Like, I can now create an audience segment that I know they all fall in this group because they told me and send a similar message. So it's still really scalable. But again, it's just, I think the benefit here is just going back to that idea of, by building that relationship with your customers, getting them to be your best acquisition channel, you can scale back on a lot of those other like expensive paid methods.
Yeah.
I think at the end, that switch, it's taken a lot to get here, but if brands do it right, they're actually going to be in a better place to grow and succeed if they become more customer led.
Now, do you talk to brands that are trying to decipher, like, here, let me take a step back. I could see that someone kind of is like, this is almost friction in the process.
Yep.
Like, we need people just to go right to the shopping experience and start browsing.
Yep.
It's like if you were to enter a physical retail store and someone's right there as you walk in and say, hold on, like, let me ask you a few questions about yourself. And you're like, no, 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 just let them browse.
Yep.
Do you feel that? Like, do some brands say, like, okay, I think this is almost a blocker, or does that not even come up at all? If you have that issue?
I haven't heard it that much because I think the biggest thing too is like, you don't have to take the quiz. I mean, there are some brands where like there's been a few
required
very
almost
specific that are kind of like, we do a custom formula, think about a pros. They're not an Okendo customer, but right, like they do a custom formula. You have to do this like 100 question quiz so that they can tailor that product to you, right? This is more of like 3 to 10 questions to get you to that right product. We recommend marketing it on your homepage. Again, it's customers like it, but you don't have to. So again, it's the same thing as the store experience, right? Some people actually like that, like store associate coming to them being like, can I help you? Like, let me walk with you together. Some people just want to do it on your own and you give them that answer, right? And again, that's why having multiple experiences and multiple touch points and multiple like attempts to collect this data is the best way to go. So like we say at Okendo, like all these products separately are great, but where they really shine is when you use them all together. Because you have, again, all those multiple touch points that like, if someone didn't engage here, great, try them here. If you have the data from them, from the review, don't ask them in the survey, right? So like kind of having it being like small micro engagements where they also again see the incentives, see the benefits, all of that. But I haven't really heard a ton of, this isn't something we want to offer because we're scared it's going to block, the shopping experience.
Well, that means you're doing the right thing, and people are receptive to that. They know that like they have to like start educating, understanding, collecting that data. So let's quickly kind of move past the I would say the collecting of data before. And then I know you talked about reviews a little bit. Let's go after the purchase, after the customer's purchase. Now maybe waiting for the products to come. What should the brand start thinking about of how they can utilize Okendo, or just like what type of data can they collect after the process that would help them?
Yeah. So customers. To your point, definitely reviews. So like I said, that's the post-purchase point where again you can just ask those same attributes that are relevant to the product. You can also tailor it, by SKU. So you might not want to ask the same questions if you're like a multi-line beauty brand. Again, for your moisturizer, you might want to ask different attributes when they're leaving a review versus like a blush, right? Like you can customize that and tailor that, because again, you also want to think about this as the data is great for you, but it also reviews are customer facing as well, and they help convert other customers. So going back to that brand advocacy idea, right? So thinking about, well, okay, what information do new customers need to see, and like what social proof do they need from past customers in those experiences to be able to find the right product for them, or make sure they feel confident in their purchase. So that's one way. And again, just thinking about the product line is important. And then surveys. So Okendo also does surveys, and we can do them throughout the customer experience, but our most popular use case is a post-purchase survey. And again, it really depends on what you're trying to do. So we have a few use cases that aren't all necessarily zero-party data related, but can help, NPS, right? We can give that to the success or to the customer support teams. How did you hear about us is a really important use case where, again, it might not be like zero-party data about them, but will help you make sure, if you are putting money into paid acquisition channels, that first thing from them, like to validate anything that you're seeing in all of your measurement tools. But then again, you can ask them those same questions that you would ask in a review, in a quiz, right? So depending on your product, you can just ask. And with that contextual targeting that I mentioned, you could say, well, if I already collected NPS, then ask them on their second purchase, like this set of questions instead. So pretty much it's the same data. Again, just being strategic about what point in the journey they're at and what's relevant to them there. But it's really kind of the same solutions. You can also do shareable link surveys too. So we've seen that, or like post-purchase, it's like, hey, we'd love to hear from you. We want to improve our product. People love feeling like they're giving feedback. Like, like they're like, I'm making a difference in this brand. Like I'm telling them how I feel. So that's a really great campaign that you can run if you want like a larger set of data as well. And giving an incentive for that too. So, being able to say like, here's 15% off your next purchase if you answer all these questions. We really want to hear from you. And again, that also encourages them to come back, make a second, third, fourth purchase. So it really should
Mhm.
be a continuous process throughout the whole journey. People's preferences change, people, if you've been with a brand for a while, like people are aging with brands if they're really truly loyal. So being able
Yeah.
to continuously ask those questions is super important too.
I'm gonna ask one question that started as soon as we started talking about zero party data. So based on the reviews,
Yep.
I my thought process is if you have a customer and you're sending them away, let's say Trustpilot
Mhm.
as an example, to say, hey, can you help me write a review on Trustpilot?
Yeah.
That I guess I mean it's interesting. That's probably not zero party data because you don't own that data. You own the customer, but not what they say. So do you have any recommendations or thoughts, or at least the way to think about it, where it's like for the customer review, should you own that review, or is it better to push that review out to the third parties because that's where people are looking? Or like how should a brand think about that, honestly?
Yeah, I would go with own your review, especially if they purchase from your site.
Right. Yeah.
Send them elsewhere. Again, unless you have a significant amount of reviews on your site and say like Amazon is low and you want to pick up that channel, maybe that's the point at which you would potentially send them there. But generally, it's like if they purchase from their site, you should own it. With Okendo, we also sync with, Walmart.com, Meta,
Mhm.
and Instagram, Facebook, so that you can actually sync those star ratings from Okendo
Oh,
to
interesting.
other things. So we can also do that with Google Shopping as well. So if anyone's searching, you can sync those star ratings and the reviews so that you can use those reviews across other channels.
So does it look like they're just creating the review on your website and then you can sync that to any third party?
Yeah, so it's definitely, obviously not every third party in the world, but
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
basically able to sync it and it'll say like came from Okendo, but you're able to use it. So again, it's the same product. So like from a customer
yeah,
perspective, like they're not going to look and be like, well, this didn't come from Google, didn't ask for this review. No, it's reviews from the website that we're just putting and syncing in a different place. And that's really the power of like amplifying those reviews, like taking the little bit, even if you like are just starting out and you only having a small, being able to amplify it and use it throughout, your marketing activity. Again, you're just doing less kind of with more, or sorry, doing more with less. And being able to do that. And other things that we say too is like sync your reviews in your email campaigns, like abandoned cart email, just put the star rating there of the product.
mm,
Like that's going to get someone back up, or put, the quotes and the snippets from those reviews of real customers to remind them like, hey, go back. Like people love this product. Putting it again in your ad copy and like creative. And some of the best creative we've seen from customers that works super well is like 10,000 star reviews. And then they swipe through what some of the reviews are. They put that in there. Those are super impactful. So
yeah.
being able to put your reviews, owning it and then being able to use it across the rest of your marketing channels. Like I would
I love
definitely,
it.
I'd take the advantage of it if you can.
And I think the last thing to mention on that is, um, and this is only top of mind because I've had this conversation just a couple of days ago, which is like celebrating your customers
Mhm.
and how important that is. And you can't celebrate your customers without knowing your customers, and you don't know your customers without collecting the data. And so I assume that there's probably plenty of Okendo customers that do that with the Okendo platform. Do I have that right of like collecting the data and understanding a little bit more so they can celebrate them down the way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like kind of our idea of super fans, right? Like
Yeah,
these
there you
are
go.
your best customers. Celebrate them, make them feel special for staying, loyal to you. And that's kind of why we're introducing loyalty next year as well, because that's really where like, you tie it all in together, right? Like you're doing all these actions, you're talking about us, like we want to reward you. We want you to like have that um special treatment and tiers and things like that for everything you're doing for us. And then social proof, like again, I think social proof sells more than a PDP. Like people are starting to get um concerned, when like, not concerned, but weary of like, oh,
Yeah.
this brand has only 5-star reviews, or like this a really high quality image on their PDP. Great. No, what's selling is real images of real people using the product. Even if like they're
Mm,
TikTok influencers too. Like I have gotten sold on like someone actually showing me like how to use it, low quality production. So I think it's just this idea that people want to see these things in real life
I
now.
love it.
And they don't like the high quality anymore.
That's great. So let's end there. I think, again, for the audience, it's about collecting data, zero-party data that you can own for yourself. Use Okendo to do that, and then figure out all the different customer touch points in order to utilize that data to create super fans. Do I got that right?
You got that perfect.
Oh, perfect. Well, again, Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and
All right.
go collect that data.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.